So now that these rows are all dry, we're going to move on to making the wire sections that interconnect these rows together. So for this you'll need your enameled wire and some pliers. So these are a little bit tricky to make, so just bear with me. So what you need to do is bend the wire like so into a U shape, and make another U shape, and make another U shape, and make another U shape, until you have 8 of these U shapes. Well, actually, until you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 peaks, as it were, on the wire. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then what you need to do after you have this formed, take your fingers and just kind of pinch these together. So you have something that kind of looks like this. This is probably isn't the best example, but yeah. And then just leave about a foot on the end here and trim it. Alright, there's one done. So you'll need to make as many of these as you have these LED rows. So there's one, and I think I need to make 31 more. So I'll show how to make these things once more. Take your wire and have it here, and so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 peaks on this side. So after you have this, just pinch these all together. And so you have something that looks like this. And then just cut off a foot, add an extra foot to the end of this, and trim it down to size. Alright, so I need to make 32 more of these, and I'll pick up when all of these have been made. So once you have all of these wires bent into the proper shape, you're going to have to tin each one of these points. So I'll show how to do that. So for this you'll need a soldering iron, a sponge, and some solder. So take your soldering iron, wipe off all the gunk on it, and then take your bent wire piece, take your soldering iron, apply some solder to the soldering iron, try and get it so it kind of sticks on there, and just kind of touch the wire piece and try to get a blob of solder to stick onto each of these endpoints. So it'll take some practice, but if you practice, you'll probably be able to do this pretty easily. So yeah, here's a close-up of what it should look like. So you want to get them looking like this. And after you've burned off the insulation with your soldering iron, it's fairly easy to add a little bit of solder. And yeah, make little solder blobs on the end of this wire. So let me show how to do that again. First, take your wire, take your soldering iron, apply some solder so it kind of hangs off the soldering iron a little bit. I'm sure you guys can't see it, but there's a little blob on the soldering iron. And then just touch the ends of each of these loops of wire. You should have something that looks like this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tinned sections on here. And remember to also tin the little end piece that isn't a loop. So repeat this process another 30 times until you have 32 of these wire sections. And I'll pick up when we have all these made. So once you have a bunch of these things made, you will need to solder these to these LED rows. So in order to do that, take your template here and put in 8 of these rows. Once you have all these in place, you will need some tweezers, your bent wires with the ends tinned, you'll need your soldering iron, and you'll need some solder. So to start, grab your bent wire like this with the long wire on the right. So you want to solder this to this LED up here. So you want to solder it to that. So in order to do this, take your wire and take your tweezers and hold your wire in your tweezers like so. So hold your wire like this in one hand, grab your soldering iron in the other, and I don't know if you guys can see this, but touch the silver tinned bit on the wire to the lead of the LED that's pointing up, and just touch all that with the soldering iron. And just like that, you have soldered this wire to this LED. So we have this wire soldered to this LED up here. So then I'll take it from another angle. So grab your wire, grab your soldering iron, touch the blob of solder on the wire here to the pin on the LED that's facing up, and touch that with a soldering iron. And it should be soldered on. So continue doing this until you have all these soldered all the way down. And then when you get to the end, just line up the wire with the pin and just touch it with your soldering iron, and it should be soldered on. So let me record all this from a different angle. So here's the whole process from another angle. So take your wire here, touch the blob to the pin, and touch that with a soldering iron. And move on to the next one. Just touch that with a soldering iron and it should solder on. So now that all of these are semi-soldered, take your soldering iron, and we're going to solder it a second time just to be sure that all the connections have been properly made. So we'll start with the very left one. So just add a little more solder to each one of these joints. And with that, the very top row has been soldered into place. So do that for the rest of these. And I'll come back when all of these are soldered. So once you have this 8x8 LED matrix soldered, carefully pry it out. Just press on the reverse side of the LEDs, and you should be able to take these out pretty easily. And then just set this aside and make 3 more of these.